So I'm sure people have, win rooms. That's pretty common from a sales strategy or rev strategy standpoint. But the one that I love the most, actually, and I tell this every week to the team, is the loss meeting. And we actually celebrate our sales losses, which is super weird to do. Like, when you think about it, you're like, why am I celebrating losing a deal? But there is so much you can learn, and we do it cross-functionally. So we pull in, product into the call. Like, why are we losing deals, regardless if it's product related or not? And so the idea of like, you're all in it together on key meetings. You can't be in every meeting together, right? But you pick strategic ones, and that's where like you learn the most.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the revenue intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
Andrew, thanks for hanging out with me. I always say this to all of our guests, but there's no better way to spend a Friday than hanging out with fantastic revenue leaders. So thanks for joining the show.
Awesome, Devin. Thanks for having me.
And so today we're going to cover, alignment, specifically how to align teams to supercharge revenue. And so I know the word alignment isn't the most emotionally pulling one, right? It doesn't not necessarily the most exciting. But if you've ever worked at a company or a team that's really misaligned, then you start to feel really, then you get some emotional pull because it's not fun. So that's what we're going to focus on today, because you've led sales transformation for years now, and as the GM of SMB at NielsenIQ, you oversee sales, marketing, product. It's a big question I'm going to ask because it's a big job, but like, how do you ensure all those teams are in sync?
Yeah, no, it's probably the hardest question, right? It's extremely tough to do, and like you said, if you've had experience, which pretty much everyone has, seen a team, misaligned. And so, by no means are we perfect in any way, but we've had a lot of lessons learned. And so I'll kind of dive into some of them.
Yeah.
But the way that we've, I think, been most effective, and this is all, I would say, in the last 2 years, again, like you mentioned, I spent a lot of time in sales operations, sales enablement, sales transformation for 5 years, and then got deep into this, sales and GM role. I'd say first and foremost, where I've seen things go the most the wrong direction is just the basics of starting with goals and objectives. It sounds obvious, sounds super easy, and everyone's like, oh yeah, everyone's got goals, everyone's got objectives.
Yeah.
But the reality is not everyone's reviewing each other's objectives and looking cross-functionally. So for me, it's not just coming up with your own function of sales or marketing. Everyone has objectives, great, you've documented it, and maybe you have an HR system, maybe you don't. But it's sharing and aligning goals across those key pillars and spending the time to make sure that if sales has a revenue target or, pipeline or opportunity target or win rate target, it's aligned to a marketing target that is also realistic, and likewise is connected to a product, and product has objectives on product releases, timelines, and those are linked to revenue goals. And so those things actually need to talk to each other. Again, super simple, super obvious, but it just doesn't get done a lot because I think there's just so much going on in an organization. You don't spend enough time working across outside of like your main view. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of first thing from a, how to sync the teams. It's get them moving in the right direction and aligned on kind of the incentives. The second thing that's worked really well for us, and because we've probably done it the wrong way before too, is getting the cadences and rhythms stood up to be like hyper real time. And I mean, like, you have live chats that are focused on alignment or focused on the customer. And so whether that's, a Slack or a Teams group that you're creating, within NielsenIQ, we use Teams. We've got multiple chat flows that are cross-functional to address live, questions, issues, whatever it is, ideas.
Right.
And then we've moved all of our cadences to be weekly and fully end-to-end cross-functional. So like as a GM now, I run my meetings with all functions. So it's everything from marketing, sales, product, support, customer success. And so the idea is we are fully end-to-end, and we kind of run it like a scrum team. So it's a pretty senior leadership team. And we'll have a couple topics, go around the room, but then it's quickly, what are your key updates? Everyone's on the same page, and having that live status, which we kind of stole that concept of like that Scrum meeting from my experience in the product days. Product and tech worked that way, but the rest of the company didn't work that way.
Right.
And so that's helped to definitely keep us in tune every week. And then we've done a couple other fun things around like win rooms and loss rooms. So I'm sure people have, win rooms. That's pretty common from a sales strategy or rev strategy standpoint. But the one that I love the most, actually, and I tell this every week to the team, is the loss meeting. And we actually celebrate our sales losses, which is super weird to do. Like when you think about it, you're like, why am I celebrating losing a deal?
Sure.
But there is so much you can learn, and we do it cross-functionally. So we pull in, product into the call. Like, why are we losing deals, regardless if it's product related or not?
Right.
And so the idea of like you're all in it together on key meetings. You can't be in every meeting together, right? But you pick strategic ones, and that's where like you learn the most. So there's a couple other things, but I'll pause there and feel free to dive in.
I like it a lot. I'm just I'm smiling and nodding for people who can't see me. But no, and it was so I was in sales for like 6-ish years before I moved into marketing, and I quickly realized like we've all experienced it, and I mean it's been even probably blown out of proportion. Like the sales and marketing alignment, like those are like I don't know, maybe it was fun marketing somewhere for people to like make them clash, more than they maybe really do. But what I learned when I got to the marketing side was sales is revenue. Obviously, no doubt. And a lot of the misalignment or the friction comes from marketing either not being aligned to sales or, to revenue, or when there's like other goals, other things that are not like immediate revenue focused, sales doesn't know what those goals are. So they see active marketing in the, in the field, and they're like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And to your point, it's because they don't know the why behind it. There's a good reason. They just don't know what it is.
Yep. Yeah, totally spot on. Yeah, and we've seen that go the wrong way, plenty of times. And I think there's an element there of like, to a degree, taking your ego out of it, right? Because everyone's got kind of this perspective of what they're doing is super critical, and it's kind of taking a step back. And one of the things that we ground ourselves on that's worked in the last couple of years is grounding yourself just around that customer focus, like that customer feedback, that customer loop is the center point, and everything else hangs off that. And then it's, the rhythms and objectives should align to that. And, obviously it's tying into revenue and everything else, but that kind of has helped us refocus and resync whenever we got like disjointed.
Nice. Well, let's flip the question then, because to disjointed, right? So, I mean, you've got a lot of experience, and maybe there's still things that happen kind of today, but why would you say most orgs struggle with alignment? Like, is it, just the lack of the things we talked about? Are there other maybe a little bit more, I want to say, like granular things that, maybe like little hurdles along the process? I'm curious, like what prevents this from happening? Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly really hard to do right. And obviously there's a people dynamic to it as well, right? That there's a human element to alignment that you have to manage closely. And it's on a person by person basis. One thing I'll say, though, that I've seen drive a lot of misalignment, aside from objectives, and that's kind of the first and foremost. The second one is just the speed and the ability to kind of move fast enough and keep pace with the market. And what I've seen is, sales is moving like a mile a minute, right? They're constantly calling on clients, dealing with challenges with competition. They're moving really quickly. And so sometimes the rest of the organization isn't moving at the same pace, so that the velocity of the different teams just isn't connected. Yeah. And so you've got maybe marketing that's working on longer term top of funnel engagement that's multi-month, multi-quarter strategy. Sales maybe is doing something hyper focused in the week, in the month, and then you've got product who could be working on things that are year long or whatever it might be.
Sure.
And so I think those timelines just immediately are in conflict, right? Like without a doubt, that's going to create tension and stress and frustration. And then, what kind of starts to happen where orgs struggle is just the communication. Like if you don't have that center point around the client, or you don't have that, weekly scrum meeting that's fully end to end, that's pulling everyone together, or win rooms and loss rooms where everyone feels like connected around winning, or, why did we lose? I think that communication falls apart completely, and you start to blame one another, right? Right. And it's so easy to, you're sitting in sales, you can blame marketing for not having enough, leads or whatever it is, you're not getting the product out there. You can blame product for not, delivering the product. You could blame sales for not closing deals. Like there's so much that you can all play that game. And that's where, to me, it's like you take that ego out from a culture standpoint, from a sales culture, which is something we focus on a ton through training and repetition. And then you start to have some empathy across the functions as well as understanding of what they're doing, right? And I think that's where you start to get away from the blame game. It just becomes like, all right, how do we succeed? Like, let's all get on the same side. And like, if you can rally around just wanting to win and not focusing internally winning battles, but like winning externally, then that's when your organization is going to start to move.
That has been, and again, maybe this is obvious. As we all know, some of the most enlightening things are kind of obvious, at least maybe in hindsight. But one of the things I noticed across all departments I've worked for is you can get a really good barometer for the culture based on if the conversations people are having is focusing on how to win, how to improve, versus blaming, complaining, talking about all the stuff that's broken, and kind of just doing the cycle of venting, and you know what I mean? And there's a place for both, right? Like, I'm sure Andrew's like, I just got to vent for 5 and get it out, and then move forward into like game plan. But it's a really symbolic kind of action of like what the culture is, and especially if it's like kind of common practice, like it's actually very rare people are positive and talking about how to build and grow, and mostly just like, oh geez, yeah, Andrew once again like then do da, 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 you know what I mean? It's like really take off.
Totally.
So I have to imagine you have some sort of process or framework for driving alignment. I don't know if we have time in today's session to go through it in full, because I know that when you're running large teams, there's a lot of nuance to it. But I'd be kind of curious. Maybe it's part of these meetings. Maybe it's just kind of your philosophy, Andrew. But like, how do you kind of approach driving alignment? Maybe there's some key elements worth sharing.
Yeah. So I think there's probably 3 buckets. I mentioned the first one, goals. The second I'd think through is always cadences and rhythms, and the third would be around roadmap, like product roadmap. So what we focus on, or what I've kind of put together, is alignment early on in the year around goals and objectives, and then quarterly re-engagement on those goals and objectives. And so that's a quarterly cadence, and then we do monthly operating plan reviews that are just true deep dives. And it's not because like corporate set you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? It's really, let's build an operating plan as if we were our own company, right? And I think if you take that mentality with your team, whether you're influencing a team as a RevOps leader or you're a sales manager or a sales executive, and you take that focus of, if we were our standalone like startup, how would we do this? Like, how do we stay in sync? You can get away with not being in sync in a large company. I think that's part of the problem. So having that operating cadence, going deep end-to-end and spending the hours to go truly end-to-end through the business, I think keeps you connected. And so we've got a quarterly high level, kind of monthly deep dive, and then we've got all the weekly rhythms that I mentioned, the weekly scrum meetings that are end-to-end, not just product and tech. And then the other thing I would hit on from a process standpoint is, and we didn't talk too much about this, but you've got that whole product roadmap, key part of most SaaS companies or anything that is being built. And so having the cadence there of how both market feedback gets shown or presented into product, and product roadmap and releases come out either monthly or every 2 weeks, and that gets fed back into the organization. Like, that process is super critical to get right. So for us, we've created rhythms where we're, again, cross-functional teams come together. We've got cadences around what we call market feedback bi-weekly. That feedback's coming in like very, strategically. And then we have live feedback sessions. So things like Slack or chats or Teams that are giving kind of real-time feedback along with NPS. So that's creating kind of your cadence of inflow. And then we've got the outflow of releases and updates that happen every month, within our company. Right. So I think having those cadences, having that product roadmap, and then all of that tying into marketing, right? So on those roadmap sessions, on the feedback sessions, marketing is in all of those. And so then they're keying that up to their overall calendar and strategy of different campaigns. And so if you've got that, I kind of think of it as like a flywheel. You've got those 3 components, marketing, sales, and product, working in sync. And that starts to spin at the right speed. Like, some incredible things can happen in the marketplace.
That's really interesting. And I think you'll tell me if that's the answer to this question, because when you're saying earlier, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I felt it, which was like sales moves, the fastest, marketing moves like kind of fast, and then product moves pretty slow. And all love to product people who are listening. Just at least in, relative terms, are those processes of visibility and those cadences, is that how you kind of sink in those three different speeds of, teams that need to work together?
Yeah, I think it's like bringing a common denominator together, right? Where you can engage. And what we've been able to find is, like the history of product being really slow, like by having that live engagement, instead of being something that they got maybe input once a month or once, deep dives every quarter to like real time, then product actually sped up. And like now product is almost at pace or even, is moving faster than sales. And so we had times within our company, within NielsenIQ and Kpis, this platform that we built and one of the platforms that I lead, that was moving faster than sales. So it was interesting, like the velocity rates, if you get it working, we were pumping out product and marketing content faster than sales could learn about it and keep pace. And so we had to pare down. Like, so you think about those throttles, and when people get rallied and motivated, that's when it becomes a game changer.
So Andrew, as you probably noticed in my interview style, I like to ask how to do things, why we should do them, and then give me an example of you not doing that at all, which is usually, teeing up how you learned it in the first place. Because to your point, the show is just like you. We like to celebrate, not losses, but learnings. So I'm curious, tell me about a time where, project expectations didn't go as planned, or maybe how alignment didn't quite work and how you adjusted.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so we've had plenty of failures, plenty of big bloopers, but I'll share at least one or two good ones.
Yeah.
So in my past role, I was a product officer for an incubator within NielsenIQ called Kpis, and it was a company that we stood up and then we pulled it back into the core company, and it's one of the products that my team now sells in the U.S. So we had created this platform called Kpis. It was a product that provides data and analytics for small and emerging CPG companies. Really, intuitive, incredible capability. It had a cool website. We built kind of the first ever like data and analytics shop, kind of like a mini Amazon, right? You can go in, swipe a credit card, and immediately get access to data about your products and competitive products, and help tell your story to investors and tell your story to retailers. So cool stuff.
Yeah.
We're like, all right, this is awesome. We built this. The go-to-market's there. We know the total addressable market. We've got the sales process ready to go. We've got the marketing content. And so we just thought, as soon as we do like some blast emails, we're just going to blast this out. We're going to, get thousands of responses. The shop is just going to, be self-serve, and everyone's just going to start buying.
Yeah.
And bam, we went to like launch day, and like a week or two later, we're like, this is not happening.
No one's coming to our store.
Right. We thought like, we'll send out 30,000 emails, do a bunch of, typical campaign work, advertising. It's just going to happen. And it was like, nope. We had some inflow, but like nowhere near what we expected. And so that was a huge wake up call of like, this isn't working. Like on paper strategy just was not working. And so then all of those kind of processes that I mentioned, like had to get enacted, those cadences of like, all right, we got to fix something because it's not, we got to get real time. Like it's not going to solve itself. And so what we ended up doing was, one, we needed to get more attention. We needed to get the marketing and sales engine working and connected to product. Was it a product issue? Was it getting the voice out there? It was a little bit of everything is what we found out. And so what we ended up doing was creating more data-driven and personalized marketing engagement and sales engagement. So the generic blast of like, hey, have you heard of data and you need data and insights to run your company? Like that wasn't doing anything. But when we were able to communicate and engage with companies that we could provide specific information about their company, about the challenges they were going through, and use what we called our NielsenIQ brand score, which was a concept of like, let's create the equivalent of like a credit score, right? Like everyone knows their credit score. If you're red, green, yellow, it's at 850 points. We wanted something like so simple, because all the data and analytics that Nielsen provides was actually kind of complex and confusing for these small brands. And we're like, we're not cutting through. So we worked with product to create this concept of NielsenIQ brand score. Simplifies everything, gives you a grade and score, allows you to benchmark, all that kind of stuff. So we use that in those email cadences, in the sales engagement, in the prospecting. And so by having almost like an automated but personalized set of content, that got like a 30% increase in engagement rates and reply rates. Wow. And then we started to see the inflows of like, hey, this is really cool. Oh, I love what you've done with the platform and I love everything else about the product, but now you've got my attention. So it was turning that on, but it meant like product had to be super in tune with, okay, how do we build out this brand score? What's the whole algorithm behind the scenes? How do we serve it up in the front end? Marketing's thinking about how do I start to advertise it? How do we create like brand score awards, right? So that people get awards and are excited and therefore want to engage with their product and don't feel like they're being sold to so hard. And so that wheel started to get in motion. That was the first time that I think we really felt, okay, we've got something pretty unique and it's getting some media attention and some great following.
That's a great story. I love that. And I want to dig in a level deep if you'll take me there, Andrew, which is, so I love the aha moment. There's an oh shit moment, which is like, oh crap. This isn't working. Something's not right. That probably was dollar signs, I imagine. And then obviously you backtrack, right? And you see other KPIs. But to your point, I'm like, now that I know how you operate at a high level, I imagine the right, all those stakeholders got together, right, in one of these meetings, and it was like, we got to figure out what's broken. And you'd mentioned really and kind of passing, like, it was a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I want to know the aha moment that got you to this brand score. Like, there had to have been a turning point where like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And the reason I'm so interested is if there's ever a great time to just start pointing fingers, it's like, hey, this really big thing didn't work. And it's not super obvious who it is, but it's definitely everybody else at the table and definitely not me. You know what I mean? Like that could be an easy reaction. So, can you kind of take me through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think where the aha moment started to come from was we when we were launching and building the platform, we kind of stood up a group of trailblazers. We're kind of early entry clients who had free access to the product while we were like in a beta phase. And so we got a lot of feedback that the platform was still too complex, that reports weren't easy, that it wasn't intuitive on how to use some of the analytics, whatever it was. And so that started us down this path of like, we've got to make this tool way more proactive and simplified. There's tons of power behind the scenes, but that became the like, this isn't going to scale because in our marketplace, what we're really trying to build for was the 30 or 50,000 brands out there that are, mom and pops all the way up to ones that are, doing a couple 50 million or 100 million in size, but again, small compared to the, the giants of the world that are doing billions in sales. And so we realized, all right, people don't have analysts, like they don't have data scientists who can do all this hard work. And a lot of us in the team were kind of that like analytical background. And so we just assumed it was easy. And so what we started doing is saying like, all right, your wife or your mom has to be able to, run a report or test this and use it. And so two things came out of it. Like the aha was, this isn't simple. We got that feedback from clients, like very straight up. And we wanted that feedback. So I think that's the other key thing is we weren't shying away from it. And I've seen platforms, and it's happened in NielsenIQ, it's happened in any company, that like they're so stuck in their way and proud of what they do that they almost don't want to hear or they'll ignore that interaction or that client feedback. Yeah. So when we got that, like we really took it hard, right? Because you feel bad, like you're bummed about it. And so we ended up kind of going down two paths. One was to step up this concept of alerts, which was like, hey, just notify me of insights and then I will use your platform. Like proactively send me insights. And the second one was, hey, we've got this really powerful kind of grading and scoring and analytics behind the scenes, but that is way too much. It's going over people's heads. We need something really simple on the surface, like grades. Everyone knows ABCD, like everyone knows red, yellow, green. Like that's what I need to visualize. And so it was that client feedback of those. I think we had like 9 Trailblazer clients that was pretty consistent on, hey, there's cool things over here, but it's not doing enough for us proactively, or it's not simple enough. And then that just forced us to like, really challenge ourselves. How do we simplify this? Like, how do we make an easy button? We want this to be the easy button.
It made me think of like, if someone was lovingly bought me a Ferrari right now, I would be like, Andrew, thank you so much. There's so much power under there. I don't drive a stick. I have no idea how. I'm trying to get to the grocery store. Like help me bridge like me wanting this car and being able to use it.
Totally, yeah. And the world of like CPG, which consumer packaged goods that I play in, retail information, online data. It's a Ferrari, right? There's so much data that small companies typically never had data, but then when they did, they were drowning in it, right? So it's like, how do you simplify it down so that you can, behind the scenes or under the cover have a Ferrari, but you're, feel like you're driving a bike?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And so what's kind of goes to my next question, which was going to be, how does the customer voice, right, play a role? I think we kind of just uncovered it, right? It's like the, undeniable truth, which is as much as, product, sales, marketing, support, all those things we think and we want are all good. And that, why, strategy behind some of our decisions. But at the end of the day, it's what the customer says, because it's our customer. It's who we need to please. Are there any other ways or examples maybe that you all lean on voice of the customer to kind of, drive decisions or maybe validate others?
Yeah. And I'll give a little background story. So when I was in the revenue and sales operations and sales enablement role, I introduced NPS to the company, which was to focus on this voice of customer, because we didn't have anything standardized globally. We're in about 100 markets, and we didn't have a standard system. Got super passionate about it. Did a ton of research to try to help drive and transform the organization. And there were pockets of huge success and pockets of not. And what I found out was similar to what I was mentioning. It's just so easy to ignore it because you can get so internally focused, even though if you have these cadences or have these platforms to give feedback, if it's not built into your internal processes of how you create new products, create new sales material, create new marketing content, then fundamentally, like, that voice of the customer isn't going to do anything, even if you're collecting it. So obviously step one is you got to have those mechanisms. You got to have NPS scores. You got whatever customer satisfaction you're doing or assessments. Right. For us, it was a combination of having real-time feedback in our product. So we didn't want our voice of customer to be something that we send once every 6 months or once a year. Right. Like, we wanted it to be live in the platform that would pop up, right, and give you real-time engagement. And that was a constant feedback loop to sales, marketing, and product. And then the second thing was we took it to heart. Like, every single time there was essentially a detractor, right, within the NPS, it was, okay, I want to know exactly why. Let's have a follow-up call or follow-up, message. Let's get to the details. Let's get to the root cause. And it was that level of, like, we all want this to be successful. We're not going to hide from it, even if it's pointing at you and, like, you did the wrong thing or it was your job or whatever it was. Like, as long as you could find out, that was awesome. And as long as that center point led me to, like, okay, I now have a piece of intelligence I can use to improve or better beat the competition, I'm going to go put it into place. So I think it's that role of voice of customer has to be the center point that ties every function and process together. If you don't have that, it's like the center KPI, right? Like, everything else is going to hang off that, and build your processes around how fast you're iterating around the product, how fast you're changing your messaging within marketing, how quickly maybe you're changing your sales tactics. So to me, it's like the center point that you've got all your revenue and KPIs and output, more like output components, right? But that client or customer or prospect is the center point.
Totally makes sense. And I like what you're saying too. Like, even if it's pointing at you, because as you're saying earlier about culture, it's like we're celebrating and happy that we have the voice and we know the thing to focus on. Now let's go make the change. Like, that's the win right there, not just trying to find positive affirmation from our clients and hiding from the the negative or the constructive ones.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and one of those things, like I mentioned before, those loss review calls where we celebrate, like, joke. I mean, I'm serious. I do a round of applause when we lose a deal, only if we learn something from it. And that's kind of the rule. It's like, if you lose a deal and you don't learn anything from it, you're not going to get a round of applause. Like, that's not success. But if you lose and you know why, and you know what we can do to improve, like, hats off. That's great. You should have a high loss rate. And that's weird, but it's so important, because that puts the voice of the customer of, like, what was that feedback? Why didn't we succeed? Right. Directly at the center of, our culture.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to round third. We're going to go home here with kind of a last, a little bit about data, because I know, I mean, Gong and NielsenIQ, clearly data obsessed companies. You're the big dogs, and we're catching up in terms of size, but we both, operate and deliver, data. And so I'm curious if there's any other KPIs. You mentioned NPS. Are there any other KPIs or metrics that you're looking at to ensure that your teams are aligned?
Yeah. So there's a ton of metrics, and I'm sure you guys are the same. I mean, first and foremost, right, it's one, can you get your hands on all the data, and is it clean? And that was something that was always really challenging for me when I was in a sales ops and rev ops type role, was getting the right data and getting clean data to the business, to the GMs, to the market leaders to run the company. So that's a massive undertaking to get it right. It's still not perfect. But once you have that, all the classic KPIs plus a lot more, I think, come into fruition. And I'll hit on a couple of those. Yeah. One is around the product KPIs, and it's really important that sales and marketing see those KPIs. So for us on our platform, think of it as like reports and alerts, but think of it as like usage rates over different modules within our product. Sure. So the number of usage, across different products helps prioritize what aspects of the product are working, what reports or alerts are working, or which one should we, remove. What kind of packaging and pricing should therefore, or could it command in the marketplace?
Right.
So those in-product app metrics need to be shared with marketing and sales, because that is how you kind of tweak the model and make sure that your pricing and packaging are working relative to the usage, as well as the success rates, like the voice of customer, right? As well as your win rates. So the product metrics, super important. NPS gets included in that, usage rates. Gotcha. Then we think about like the websites, click-through rates, where they're moving through, progression rates, where they're dropping out. That gets shared back with product, because product actually integrates with our website. And so they're working together on how do you improve that entire flow from, hey, I'm an early funnel lead, all the way to, hey, did I sign up and did I start using, my product? Right. Then the other thing that we do is we break everything down into FTE rates. So we look at, sales per FTE, dollars per FTE, monthly recurring revenue, incremental monthly recurring revenue, variances versus prior month. We look at all those variances and monthly metrics to see, are we pacing the right direction? Is our NPS pacing that same direction as the sales metrics? Are marketing leads pacing that same direction? And so by having like a total scorecard view, and it's kind of it's actually the first couple pages of our operating plan review, is a combination of sales, product, and marketing metrics. And if you stack those all together, you get a really good sense about where you're going, right? And so when you're looking at sales metrics like average TCV size, you're looking at number of clients, number of logos, average win rate, and then you're looking at also NPS scores, right? And you're looking at usage rates of your product. You're looking at marketing leads. You start to get the full picture of like, okay, is this engine I'm building healthy? Is it growing? Do I need to add more gas to it? Is it a lead generation issue? Is it a sales conversion issue? Is it a product usage issue? Is it a support issue? What are the number of support tickets you're getting per week or per month? So all of that kind of factors in. And if you have that data, which I know, fingers crossed, not everyone does, right? And you can centralize it, then you can really start to look at your business, support your leaders, and say, okay, this is what we need to do to improve. Here's our bottleneck, or here's something we need to invest in to improve upon, and then you're set up for better success to compete.
If I'm being completely honest, Andrew, you more than exceeded my hope for that question. I got the exact answer and beyond that I was hoping for, cool. asking someone from NielsenIQ. But I mean, it sounds like when you have, I know it's semi-obvious and it's like part of your day-to-day, but when you have all that data in front of you, when you have that level of visibility, there was a lot of questions you just mentioned that you can answer really quickly, and that's really the value of it, right? You're like, if it's marketing, if it's sales, why certain, like, you know what I mean? When you can overlay that information, it makes obviously decision making easier, faster, and more effective.
Yep, totally.
Well, all good things must come to an end, Andrew, but I hope we do cross paths again sooner than later. I just want to thank you really for hanging out on the show, sharing your expertise, some great examples, and tons of takeaways for our listeners. So thanks for hanging out with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Devin.